Hi, I am Thandi Khosa, a finalist in the National Teachers Award for Mathematics. Throughout my years of teaching and marking matrics nationally, I have realized that mathematics learners are not performing well in certain topics. These topics are Euclidean geometry and trigonometric for paper 2, and for paper 1 is function and calculus. These will be the topics I will be covering in these revision videos. Good day, matrix. You're speaking to Thandi Khosa. This is paper 1 revision for final examination 2019. So we're going to study with question 4, which is functions, graphs. That is a combination of all types of graphs that we have from grade 10 to grade 12. So today we're going to start with one of the extra charge examination previous question paper, which is question number 4. The given equation, so we are dealing with question number 4, which is normally the question in any question paper for paper 1. You'll find question number 4 for functions. So the given equation was g of x equals 6 divided by x plus 2 minus 1. This is the equation given to us, and the questions were in 4.1 they were saying write down the equations of the asymptotes of g. The moment they put the word x, s, it means we have to write both horizontally and vertically asymptote. So for the horizontally one is y is equals to a minus 1, and the vertical one is x equals minus 2. Those are your asymptotes, and you have your 2 marks, which is simple and straightforward. 4.2, it was we are asked to calculate the y-intercept of g. Remember, for y-intercept, we always have to let x to be 0. So in 4.2.1, we are asked to find the y-intercept. Now our y-intercept, we said x equals 0. Remember, we have to go back to the general equation that was given to us, and in that equation now we let x to be 0. So remember, folks, g of x is the same as y. So looking for y-intercept, we say g of x is equals to 6 divided by 0 plus 2 minus a 1. So remember, then we can just simplify there to get to the solution. This is 6 divided by 2 minus a 1, which will be 3 minus a 1, and that's now is 2. And to be safe when drawing the graphs, normally you must put them in the coordinate form, which x will be 0 and your y will be 2. That is the safe part of it, so that even if they ask you to write it in the coordinate form, you are covered. And the 4.2.2 questions, it says you must find the x-intercept. So let's do that. In 4.2.2, to find the x-intercept, we let our y to be equal to 0. So g of x, remember, is that y. So we go back to the original equation as it was at the beginning. So then we'll have 0 is equals to 6 divided by x plus 2 minus a 1. And then we simplify, whereby we'll end up with x plus 2 equals 6. Now one will say, what happened to the minus 1? Remember, the minus 1 will be taken to the left-hand side by adding 1 in both sides. So you will come to your equation, and then you will add a 1 there, and then you add a 1 there. After adding a 1, you will have to remove the denominator. How to remove the denominator, therefore, will be to multiply both sides of your equation, the left and the right, by x minus 2. So there you will be multiplying by the covert of x plus 2 in both sides of your equation. So if you multiply by x plus 2, can you guys see that x times 1 will give us x, and a 2 times 1 will give us a 2. And even this side, the whole x plus 1 will have the covert bracket, that is hidden bracket, which are not there. Then they'll cancel each other, we're left with a 6. And then we simplify further. In simplifying further, then we will subtract a 2 in both sides of our equation. Therefore, our x will be equal to a 6 minus a 2, which will be 4. In coordinate form, that will be a 4 and a 0. Folks, that's how you will have to find the x-intercept of the equation. Okay, matrix, we are continuing with the question 4 of paper 1 that we have just started now. If we look at it, we have answered question 4.1 and 4.2. Now we are going to 4.3. In 4.3, the question says now, draw the graph of G, showing clearly the asymptotes and the intercept with the x's. Remember, we just have found the x asymptotes and the y asymptote in the previous question. Like question 4 needed you to, 4.1 needed you to find the asymptote. These are the asymptotes. And now in the 4.2, we're finding the x and the y-intercept. So this is our x-intercept and that's our y-intercept. So we need this. Can you see that if you answer your 4.1 and 4.2 correctly, it is very simple for you to answer the 4.3. So let's draw the graph. Remember guys, in 4.3, we are just plotting the graph and label everything correctly. So this is our 4.3. In drawing the graph, we have to first construct our Cartesian plane. In a Cartesian plane, we always have to label our y and x. Folks, you don't have to use a ruler and put the points. We are sketching the graph, we are drawing it to show the x-intercept, the y-intercept, and the asymptotes. So if you want to draw it a little bit perfectly, we start with our asymptote. Remember, y is equals to -1 is our asymptote. So this is a scale here, we can use this as a -1, and then we draw the line for -1. For -1 to have the perfect scale a little bit. So we will draw that line using a ruler. So you just put a ruler there and then you plot your -1. This is the line where -1 is, y equals -1. And the other asymptote is x equals a -2. So if this is 1, -1, this will be -2. So you put a ruler again there and you put a dotted line. Folks, we use the dotted line to show the asymptote because we have to plot a graph afterwards. Remember, we had our x-intercept and our y-intercept. And we said we are writing it in the coordinate format so that we can be able to remember. Now, this is the point where we have 2. And this is the point where we have -1. Remember, for asymptotes, for 2, that's where our y-intercept is. The coordinate is 0 and 2. And the x-intercept is where there is 4. So this, our not up to scale graph, but this is the point 4. Now, when we are drawing this thing, we have to remember that the graph will never touch 2 points. And that is the line x equals -2 and the line y equals a -1. So let's plot the graph. The intersections or the x-intercept and the y-intercept are vitally important. So you must make sure that your graph actually cuts through that. And it is a positive graph because 6 is a positive, which is the value of a. Remember that what is happening here is that the graph has shifted its asymptote. In other words, the y has shifted 2 units to the left and the x has shifted 1 unit down. That is what happened here. So for this case, it's like our new Cartesian plane is that those asymptote. And the other part, we just come there and then we spot to show the other part of our hyperbola. And label your graph to say this is my graph of g of x on my graph of g. In that case, you have clearly showed your asymptote, you have clearly showed your intercept with the x-axis. And voila, you will get 3 marks. And that is how you answer the question number 4.3. A very simple solution to be getting it. You don't have to use many things or to go to the different parts. Okay, let's continue to 4.4. In 4.4, the question says, determine the equation of the line of symmetry that has a negative gradient in the form of y is equals to something. So remember, folks, when you are finding the equation of the line of symmetry, we use equations of y is equals to either plus or minus the denominator of our hyperbola and plus minus our value of q. So now in this case, we have our denominator of a hyperbola as x plus 2, and we are going to minus the 1, meaning that our equation is negative x minus 2 minus 1. This is negative x minus 3. In that way, you have found your equation for 4.4. Question 4.4, you have determined your equation of the axis of symmetry or line of symmetry. Is it clear, folks? So that's how simple you can get to the solution. Remember, when they say negative, it means you're going to use the negative as a direction. If they say the positive one, you will have to use the positive one. Okay, let's continue to 4.5. Now, it is very important for you to answer the questions bearing in mind the marks that are allocated for that particular question. Look at question 4.5. They said, determine the values of x for which the equation of g of x, which is 6 divided by x plus 2 minus 1, it is greater or equals to minus x minus 3. Now, can you see that they just gave you the equation of minus x minus 3, which is the equation you were supposed to find in 4.4. If you take note, they've already given you the equation that you were supposed to get in 4.4. But if you didn't look at it, you couldn't have seen it. In other words, they're saying, look at the graph of g of x. If you can, throw the equation or the graph of that you have found in 4.4, which is minus x minus 3. And find whereby the g of x is on top of the line of a straight line of minus x minus 3. That's what they're saying. So if we had to draw that, you can do it using a pencil or very light thing for you to know and understand. This is for understanding, and make sure that you get it right. Remember, if we have the equation y equals to negative x minus 3, our y-intercept is going to be in a negative 3. So let's say this is where your negative 3 is. That's your y-intercept. X-intercept is also going to be in the negative 3. So this is where you have it. Folks, this will cut through the intersection of your asymptotes, always. So doesn't matter what you do, the line that you'll draw there, which is a straight line, will actually cut through the intersection of the asymptotes. So in that case, this will be that intersection. Okay, now let's look at it. They're asking us, where will you find the g of x on top of the equation of y, which is minus x minus 3? It's very simple. You look at the graph, you will see my graph starts here. What is the value of x in there? Because that's what you are looking for. It is minus 2. So minus 2, it is the one that will give you the solution. But remember, the graph or the solution cannot be at minus 2 because it's an asymptote. Minus 2 cannot be a solution. Therefore, your x must be greater than minus 2, only without an equal sign. Do not be tempted because they've given you equation with an equal sign. If you look at the question, they said greater or equals to. So you need to make sure that you look at those concerns through redrawing the graph. And that is the end of question 4. Okay, matrix, we are continuing with the revision of paper 1. And we're still in function, question 4 again. So this is the questions that we are dealing with at this moment. So let's see. In question 4, they have given us another or a different expression, which is an equation of f of x equals to 2 to the negative x plus 1. If you remember the previous one, we were dealing with the hyperbola. Now we are dealing with exponent. Now in the exponent, what we are asked to do here, it is to determine the coordinates of y-intercept. So that is 4.1. Remember, when you are determining or finding the y-intercept, you always must let your x be 0. So to be safe, you can use f of 0 equals 2 to the negative 0 plus 1. Remember, 0 is neutral, so you write it negative or positive, it does not really make a difference. Anything to the exponent of 0, it's going to give you 1 always. So even if it's negative, we take it as positive. So that is going to be 1 plus 1, which will give us a 2. That is your y value, which is the y-intercept. But the question says you must determine the coordinates. So at the end of the day, your answer must be in the coordinate form. So in the coordinate form, it's a round bracket with a 0 representing x and a 2 which represent y. So you get your 1 mark, and that's what you would have done to answer that question. Going on, we have 4.2. In 4.2, they went straight and says, sketch the graph of f, clearly indicate all intercept with the x's as well as any asymptotes. Now they're telling you that there's an asymptote. You must bear in mind that an asymptote of an exponent is only one, which is determined by y it's equals to 1 in this case. So the asymptote that you find in an exponent is an horizontal asymptote, which is shifting vertically up and down. So this is now your asymptote. Bear in mind that even if they didn't ask you, you need to know that asymptote is going to be equal, y is equals to a 1. Okay, if you have to find the x-intercept, you can see, or you will quickly see that there's no x-intercept, because if you put y to be 0, you will have 0 equals to 2 to the negative x plus 1, for which you will have 2 to the negative x can be written as 1 over 2 all to the power x, which is a decreasing graph in terms of exponent. This is equals to minus 1. So you can see that there's nothing that can give you the convention or the exponential rule that can accommodate a negative 1. Therefore, x has no value. In other words, it has no solution. Meaning that your graph will never touch or cut at the x-axis line y is equals to 0. So, matrix, let us draw now the graph that we asked to, which is consisting of 3 marks. It's actually 3 marks that you can all collect if you are careful of what you are writing. So this is our Cartesian plane. Always label so that you don't confuse the marker, so that they remember that you know where your x-axis and your y-axis is. We just calculated in 4.1, you can see that our y-intercept, it's 2. So where y is equals to 2, it is where you have your y-intercept. So that's the point whereby your graph will have to touch. And we just have at the beginning to say that our asymptote is going to be x equals to, y is equals to a 1. So in the line y, you will have to draw that asymptote. Usually we use the dotted lines to represent asymptote so that it does not interfere with the lines of the graphs. So this is our asymptote, and we label it y equals 1. Now, as drawing the graph here, you'll have to bear in mind that the 1 over 2 to the exponent x means decreasing. In other words, as x is increasing, your y is going to decrease. As x is moving from the left to the right, your y is going to go down. So that's how you're going to draw your graph. But make sure that this graph, doesn't matter what happened, it does not touch the line of an asymptote, which is the line y equals to 1. And in this way, you have now completed what they wanted you to draw, and you have drawn the graph of f of x. Label it, and voila, you have your 3 marks. Okay, matrix, we are continuing in the question 4, for which we just have drawn the graph. Now, 4.3, it says, calculate the average gradient. Normally, when you see the word average, you get confused. Guys, don't be confused. The gradient is just the gradient. We all know how to find the gradient when we have to draw a graph. Now, they say, calculate the average gradient of f between the points on the graph where x is equals to minus 2 and x is equals to 1. So this is our question number 4.3. To find the average gradient, as we said, gradient is going to be the same. It doesn't have a problem. Normally, you know it's y2 minus y1, or change of y divided by change of x. Now here, because you know y is the same as f, we're gonna use f. In other words, it's like your y2 now became f. But what is the f of? The second x value that is given to you, which is 1. So it's f of 1 minus f of minus 2, which represent your y2 and your y1, divide by the values, which is 1 minus 2. Now one will say, how do I find f of 1? To find f of 1 matrix, you take your equation that was given as f of x equals to 2 to the negative x plus 1. So you substitute your x by 1, and then you will find your f of 1. So this is 2 to the power minus 1 plus 1. Remember, this is the same as 1 over 2 plus 1. While using your calculator, you'll have this as, it's going to be 3 over 2 in your calculator. So that is your f of 1. While your f of 2, or f of minus 2, it's going to be 2 to the minus 2 plus 1. So you substitute your x by minus 2, and you're going to have 2 to the exponent 2, which is now 4, because a negative times a negative will give you a positive. So it's 4 plus 1, which will give you a 5. Now you have to take this 2 and substitute back into the equation of average gradient. So you're taking your 5 and you are taking your 3 over 2, substitute it to get your average gradient. Now the average gradient will be equals to f of 1, we said it's 3 divided by 2, and our f of minus 2 is a 5. You divide this by 1 minus 2, which now will be plus 2. And when we use your calculator, you will get that as, quickly we'll have to now use the calculator, and mine is just right here with me. So let's see. If you use your calculator, this is what you are going to do in a calculator. You are going to go to your fraction button, you press it, and because you have 3 over 2 as a fraction, you press a fraction button again. So you have your 3 and divide by 2, you move it to the side, and then you press minus 5. So that's how you will do it. Divide by 1 plus 2, which is a 3, and it gives you, let's see, it gives you a negative 7 over 6. So your answer, or your average gradient, is negative 7 over 6. In other words, you have a negative gradient in a way. So you must put your calculator next to you to make sure that you get it right. Okay, and that is 3 marks, so you get your full 3 marks. The last question for question 4 then, it is question 4.4. Now in this one, they are going a little bit up high, but you need to just look at the marks allocation. It's 1 mark, so it means there's nothing fancy that you need to do there. Now they say if h of x is equals to 3 multiplied by f of x, write down an equation of the asymptotes of h. Now what they mean here is that you are going to take your equation of f of x, which was f of x equals to 2 to the negative x plus 1. You multiply that by a 3. So that's what we are going to do. Let's write it down so that we can see. If I had my f of x, equals 2 to the negative x plus 1, and I multiply now that f of x by 3 to get h of x, I will have 3, h of x equals to 3 times f of x, which now will be equals to 3 into, now you put a bracket to multiply your f of x, 2 to the negative x plus 1. If you multiply out, you will see you'll have 3 multiplied by 2 to the power of negative 1 plus 3. Now the question wanted you to find what? To write down the equation of the asymptote. Can you guys see that now your asymptote has moved from y equals to a 1 that we have found in 4.2, or that we have used to draw a graph in 4.2. So now it has shifted, or it has moved to be a 3. Now you just come and say y equals 3 is the equation of your asymptotes. In that way, you could have found your marks. That is the end of question number 4. And I guess you have understood it. Thank you. Okay, we are continuing with the revision of functions. which is now we are going to question number 5. So we'll have question 4 most of the time, question 5, and sometimes we can go to question 6 to do all these functions depending on the examiner, the person who have set the paper. So this time we had taken another one on previous examination, which is now in question 5. This is very straightforward question, but it needs you to be focused. Question 5, 5.1, it says, on the same set of x's, sketch the graphs of f and g. Take note of the same set of x's, because if you draw them separately, you did not actually answer the question. Clearly indicate all x's with intercepts and turning points. So you have to show all the x-intercepts and also the turning point. The equation given are f of x equals x squared minus 5x minus 14. Now you should have a plan in your mind to say this is a parabolic graph and it has a positive value of a. In that case, it means I'll have a smiley shape. It means that my graph will look up. If it doesn't do that, something is wrong. Now the next equation is g of x equals 2x minus 14. This is strictly a straight line, and this straight line also, it is a positive straight line that will go using your left slanter to the right and not your right to the left. Okay, so let's draw them, because in 5.1 they said you must draw them on the same set of x's. So we're gonna do the Cartesian plane. As usually when you have to draw the graph, you must have a Cartesian plane. So remember, my graphs might not be up to scale, but I will try by all means to make it visible or understandable for you. So let's put our Cartesian plane with a ruler so it's nicely drawn. We have the labels as x and y axis, which is our line. Now, every time you must draw a graph matrix, you must make sure that you find your x-intercept and your y-intercept. That goes for every graph. However, with the parabola, you have to find the turning point for you to be able to draw. So someone will be surprised, why is this 6 marks? 6 marks is because you have to go as far as finding many things. So we're gonna do that first. To start with the one for f of x, which is the parabola, we'll say f of x is equals to x squared minus 5x minus 14. So let's find the x and y intercept so we can plot. Our y-intercept, we are going to let x to be equals to 0 so we can find y. Remember, f of 0 is our y, so we'll have to put 0 wherever we see x. And this is our equation with f of 0 is equals to 0 squared minus 5 times 0 minus 14, and that makes our y-intercept to be minus 14. So f of 0 is minus 14. In other words, in a Cartesian plane, you will go and find where minus 14 is. So say this is minus 7 and make this one a minus 14. So this is where we will have our equation or our x-intercept for the parabola graph. To find the x-intercept, we will have to let our y to be equals to 0. By doing that, we are going to left with something that we need to factorize or something that is factorizable. If not factorizable, remember that you can still use a quadratic formula to find the solution. So if it can be factorizable, we can quickly factorize. So let's see, if I say x minus 7 and x plus 2 in my brackets, I think this is factorizable, so we can do that. It means that x is equals to 7 or x is equals to minus 2. So now this is our x-intercept. So if this is minus 2 and this side will have, we need a 7, so it's 2, 4, 6. Our 7 is somewhere here, so have a 7 there. That is our x-intercept. Now we are left with one thing, which is a turning point. To find a turning point matrix, you have to use a formula of x equals to a negative b divided by 2a. Remember, the b is the value that is attached to x. So that is a negative 5. So it's going to be negative 5. And a is the one that is attached to x squared. That is 1 in this case. So it means that our turning point, therefore, it's going to be a positive 5 over 2 for x value. Okay, a positive 5 over 2 can be written as a fraction, can be written as a mixed fraction, which is 2 whole number 1 over 2. And after finding the x, we need to find the y. Remember to take the x value and substitute it on the original equation, which is f of x. So now it will be f of 5 over 2 equals 5 over 2 squared minus 5 times 5 over 2 minus 14. And you can simply take your calculator and put it in. In that way, you get it simpler and faster. You don't have to put an equal sign. You can just punch it as it is on the calculator, and then you'll get it right. So let's punch them. It's let's quickly put it in and get the solution. Will be minus 14. It gives us a negative 81 over 4. It's a negative 81 over 4. If we need to check, that is in a fraction is negative 20,25, and that is below the 14. So let's say this is our negative 20 over 25 there. Negative 20.25, which is 81 over 4. That's where we have it. And the x, it's going to be 5 over 2, which is 2.5. 5 over 2, it is 2.5. So that means it's between 2 and 3. Remember our scale, this is where 2 is, and 3 is going to be here. So 2.5 is there. Let's go down so that we can be able to put our point of a turning point. Remember, your important points are the turning point, the x-intercepts, and in that way, your graph will look like that. That is your parabola graph, which is f of x. We have drawn the f of x, nice and smooth, and we can label the point that we know or what we have found, especially the turning point. There is our turning point in negative 81 over 4 as y, and for x is 5 over 2. So we are done with the parabola. Now, if we have to draw the g of x, remember g of x is a straight line. So still, the rules are the same for a straight line, for a parabola, for hyperbola, and all the types of graphs. X-intercept and y-intercept, we get it the same. So we let x to be 0 to find the y-intercept. So that means that our g of x, or the g of 0, will be minus 14. In other words, your graph must pass through minus 14. To find the x-intercept, we will let y to be equals to 0. So we have 2x minus 14 equals 0. So that is 2x equals to 14, which is now x equals 7 through dividing both side by 2. So it's still going to pass through a 7. So can you see that they all have a common point, which is the intersections of x and y. A minus 14 and a 7. Just put a ruler there and nicely put a line that will give you your equation or your graph of g of x. And that is where your 6 marks lies. Very smooth and straightforward. We are left with one question to be answered in this one. The last question is to determine the equation of the tangent to f, where x is equals to 2 whole number 1 over 14. Okay, matrix, let's move to the look at the solutions here. We had our x equals to 7 and x is equals to minus 2, and the 7 are sharing with the other one for the x of a straight line. Can you see the red one is for a straight line and the blue information is for the parabola? Of course, we are told to write the to draw the two equations on the same set of x's. So this is what you're supposed to do. Now the last question, which is 5.2, we are going to write it by the side. That is where 5.2 is. Look at what they are doing. To get 2 marks, they are saying determine the equation of the tangent to f at x is equals to 2 whole number 1 over 4. If you punch that thing on a calculator, you will see that that is the same as 5 over 2. And the tangent thereafter, it's a line that can come through this line, this point of the turning point. So for that matter, it means your y, or the equation therefore, will be a straight line that is y is equals to negative 81 over 4. And they give you 2 marks just by recognizing that. Can you see how simple that is? Okay, that is the last part of the question, and thank you. Okay, grade 12, we are continuing with the revision of functions, and now we are going to another question. Remember, these questions comes a little bit different in a way, but they are the same with the same content. What you need to do is just to understand your basics, and you will all go well. Okay, we are going to question 5 again. In this case, a graph has been drawn for you. Unlike the first ones, you were supposed to draw the graph. Now we are still in question 5. Now let's see what this question 5 is saying to us. This is the graph that is saying, they said to us, the graph of f of x is equals to a to the exponent x, where a is greater than 1, is shown below. T is a point where there's 2 and 9. Remember, 2 is the x value, and 9 is the y value on the graph. It lies on f, which is on the graph. So you can see there it is. They said in 5.1, calculate the value of a. You already have been given a point, so it is not that difficult for you to calculate the value of a. In 5.1, we are going to calculate the value of a. Let's copy the equation down. F of x is equals to a to the exponent x. And bear in mind that your value of a must be positive and greater than 1. It cannot be 1, but it has to be greater than 1. Okay, remember we are given the point t, which is 2 and 9. We must substitute that. And we know, or we have said that 2 represent the x point and 9 represent the y point. So y point in this case is our f of x. It means we are going to substitute those two, and then we can be able to find our a. So let's do that. F of x is going to be 9 equals a, and our x is 2. Now, for us to get it correct, it means that we have to change 9 to have the power of 2. Now, in an exponential rules or in exponent from lower grade, we know that 9 can also be written as 3 to the exponent 2, which now it's equals to a to the exponent 2. As our exponent are the same and our bases are not the same, we are going to therefore ignore or disregard our exponent and focus on the basis. Therefore, a is going to be equals to 3, and that is the solution for this question, and it's 2 marks. If you look at it, the 2 marks is direct and straightforward. Okay, the next question that says, determine the equation of g of x if g of x is equals to f of minus x. Matrix, what does this mean is, if I'm having an equation of f of x, but now the f of x has been changed to be minus x, so wherever you see x, you put a negative x. That will give you your g of x. You just do that. Let's do that. G of x is equals to, remember they said it's f of negative x. Now what does it mean? It means wherever we see x in the equation of f of x, which is given as f of x equals 3 to the exponent x, we are going to put x wherever, a negative x wherever we see x. So that is going to be 3 to the negative x instead of 3 to the power x, and that is can be written also as 1 over 3 all to the exponent x, and that became a decreasing exponential graph. That is 1 mark, and you could have got it just like that by replacing x value. Okay, 5.3, it's our third question. The third question says, determine the values of x for which f, when they use to the power -1, they are saying the inverse of x is greater or equals to 2. Now, what is the inverse of f of x? Our inverse of f of x, because we are dealing with an exponent, it is going to be the logarithm part of it. So our inverse is going to be determined by a log graph. In other words, our log with base of 3 and x. That will be our equation for the inverse. So they say this equation, if this equation is what? It is greater or equals to 2. So wherever this equation, which is log 3 with an x, it is greater or equals to 2, we must determine the value of x. Remember, folks, this can be written as log of x divided by log of 3. And this is now greater or equals to 2. Now, what are they saying in terms of graph? They are saying if I have the equation of log of base 3 with x, say I've drawn that, and the equation of y equals to a 2, wherever I see my log on top of the y is equals to 2 line, that's where I will get my x value. That's what it means. Now, in this case, if we had to try and draw that log, it will be simply this kind of a logarithm. Let's try to trace it. That is the kind of a graph. Now, what are they saying is, remember this is going to be 1, or the point there is 1. And what are they saying is that wherever you will have line y equals to 2. So y equals to 2 line is somewhere there. If we draw it like that, we'll have the point of intersection. Wherever this one is greater than, the log is greater than the one for the straight line, it is whereby we have to get to the solution. So let's check where that can be. Where is it greater or equals to 2 in the graph? If this is the graph that is given to you, remember, folks, the one that is given is the exponent one. So this is f of x equals to 3 to the x. And the one for the inverse, it's going to be drawn from this direction. Can you see that? Now this is our f of -1 x, which is the inverse, is equals to log with a base of 3 and x. Now if you're talking about the one for y equals 2, it means you'll have a line that is passing through y-axis at 2. So this is the line y equals 2. What they are looking for here is the point whereby the two graphs are intersecting and the log graph is on top of the one for straight line, which is y equals to a 2. So you are looking of this point. If you look at it, that point is far away from a positive 1, so it can be somewhere there, and we need to figure it out. And that is why we are using this to reason with. If I unpack my logarithm and rewrite it as log of x divided by log 3 is greater or equals to 2, I can multiply both sides then now by the log of 3. So let's multiply both sides by the log of 3, multiply both sides by the log of 3. And if that's the case, what is going to be the result here is log x greater or equals to 2 log 3. And that can be rewritten as log of base log of 3 to the exponent 2. Now, if we look at them, we have log x on the left hand side, which means that the base is a 10 because it's a normal log. So if the base there is 10, and on the right side we have log of 3 to the exponent 2, and the base is the 10. Bear in mind that 3 to the exponent 2 can be rewritten as what? As a 9. So that means that our x therefore will be equals to 9. Our x will be greater or equals to 9, which means that the point that we are talking about here in terms of graph, it's whereby our x is equals to 9, and everything that is more than that or equals to, it will make the graph of log be on top of the graph of a straight line. So it looks like a very difficult task, but it's not really. It's just need you to be focused and you can get it correct. Okay, the last question on this question 5, it is 5.4, whereby they said, is the inverse of f a function? Remember we had the graph of f, which is f of x equals 3 to the power x. And our inverse is the one which is f to the power minus 1 of x is equals to log with base 3x. Is this one a function? How do we test if it's a function or not? We need to see if our vertical line, it is touching or passing through our graph once or more than that. So if I put a ruler in this graph, move it in this direction, you can see that it is also touching once. So it means that yes, this is a one-to-one function, and therefore this is a function. Because they say, is it a function? You will respond and say this is yes, it's a function, and the reason will be because f of minus 1x, it is a 1-to-1 function. It's a 1-to-1 function. Or the relationship between the two, it is 1-to-1. So it is the 1-to-1 relation, meaning the relationship is 1-to-1. Okay, this was the last question for question number 5, and we're gonna continue with another question. For this one is the last one, so thank you. Okay, we are still continuing with the functions revision for 2019. So matrix, look at these questions. They'll always come in this kind of a different ways, but not really different. What you need to know, as I said at the beginning, is to understand your basics. Like in this case, look at the question. They said it's now in question 6, and as I said at the beginning, the questions can be in question 4 and 5, and also 6 if the examiner has decided to do that. It depends on the person who have said. Now, the information given to us in this case is f of x equals 1 over 4x squared. So 1 divided by 4x squared, where x must be less or equal to 0. In other words, x is negative, and also it has to be equal to 0. Now, the question 6.1 says, determine the equation of the inverse and write it in the form of f of minus 1 into x is equals to something. Folks, bear in mind that when they give you a format, you must write it as such. Now, how do we find the equation of an inverse from a parabolic point of view? Remember, f of x represents y. So rewrite your statement as y is equals to 1 divided by 4x squared. And write the interchanging statement, or in your mind, remember that for you to do the inverse, you must make the y value, the x value, and the x value, the y value. In other words, wherever position you see x, you put y. When you see y, you put x. So this is what we are going to do. That is x equals 1 over 4 y squared. But at the end of the day, we have to write our equation in terms of y. So y must be the subject of the formula. So multiply both sides by 4, which means you'll have 4x equals y squared. You have multiplied both sides by 4, or you have divided by 1 over 4 to get to that part. Now, y will be equals to plus or minus the square root of 4x. Because now we are looking for y. But remember, they said you must write your answer in terms of f of minus 1x. It will be equals to plus or minus 2 the square root of x, because the square root of 4 is the same as 2. and that's how you would have got your 3 marks. Okay, in 6.2, they said, on the same system of x's, sketch the graphs of f and f of minus 1, which is the inverse. Indicate clearly the intercept with the x's as well as another point on the graph for each graph of f and its inverse. So we are going to take the ruler and now draw it smoothly and nice. So let's do that. Remember that my graphs are not drawn up to scale, and this is what you could sometimes find in your question paper. The graphs are not necessarily drawn up to scale. So you label your Cartesian plane. And as I said at the beginning of this revision, I said always when you are drawing a graph, you must find your x-intercept and y-intercept. Now the x-intercept that we are looking for now is for the equation of f of x. So remember, our f of x is equals to 1 over 4 x squared. And we have been given a restriction that our graph, whatever we do, we'll have to put it where x is less or equals to 0, meaning on the negative side of x from 0. Now the x-intercept and the y-intercept in this case, they are going to give us 0. Okay. Now if it was normally so, our graph was going to be in this format. You're going to draw it like that and we'll got it right. But now because we have been given a restriction, it means that our graph will only appear on the second quadrant, which is where x is less or equals to 0. But remember, in the statement you were told to do what? You were told to find 1 point. So you need to find at least 1 point. In other words, when you put x to be 1, what will you find being y? In other words, if you put x to be 1 there, your y will be equals to 1 divided by 4. So if this is your x being 1, your y will be 1 divided by 4. So that's your coordinate. The x of a negative 1 will give us a y of 1 divided by 4. Because negative 1 and 1 are just the point on each side of the Cartesian plane. In Cartesian plane, quadrant 1 and 2, they are reflection to each other along a line y equals 0. The line y-axis, which is x equals 0. So that is why you see here I said minus 1 will be negative 1 and 1 over 4. And even if I was at 1, it will be 1 and 1 over 4 because they are reflecting along this line of y-axis, line x equals 0. Okay, now if we had to draw the inverse, this is on the positive side of y. It means that the inverse was supposed to be drawn on the positive side of what? Of x. So this is the shape that we're supposed to be looking at. However, we were told to draw where x is less or equals to 0. Meaning when we do the inverse, we are going to draw where y is less or equals to 0. So we're going to find that part, which is on the 4th quadrant. Our y is less or equals to 0. That is the equation. And where x is 1, our y will be a negative 1 over 4. So where x is 1, our y will be a negative 1 over 4. Let's do that and see what we are going to have. In the inverse, when we put x to be 1, we'll have a, we substitute in this equation, we will have y equals plus minus 2 the square root of 1. So it gives us a negative 2 or a positive 2. But because we are on the negative side, it means this is the point we are talking about whereby our y will be negative 2. So the coordinate will be 1 and a negative 2. So this is our graph. Let's check if we've answered the question properly, because if not, we won't get our full 3 marks. The question was saying, on the same system of axes, sketch the graphs of f and its inverse. Indicate clearly the intercept with axis. So that is where 0 is, as well as another point on each graph, which we have done that. And there you get your 3 marks. Okay. The last question is question 6.3. Let's check what 6.3 wants us to do. In 6.3, they said, is the inverse of a function? Is the inverse a function? You need to answer yes or no, but they said give a reason for your answer. The inverse itself is not a function. It's only a function if restriction has been done. So, so the inverse here, as we are given the restriction of saying y will be less or equals to 0. If we restrict it, we'll get therefore our inverse in this case to be a function. So yes, this one will be a function. However, if it was not given like that, we couldn't say it's a function because the restriction will not be there. So every time it's given in fully, you must restrict it by yourself to make it a function. And the reason will be, after you have restricted, it gives you the function. And now that function became one-to-one relation. So it does become one-to-one relation. After what? After the restriction. So this is your key. The restriction must be there for you to say this is a function. If the restriction is not there, then that is not a function. Okay, thank you. That was the last question. Okay, matrix, we are continuing with the revision for 2019 final examination. So here we are looking at another question 4, which is a bit interesting, and they've given us more information than they usually does. So you need to be careful and take note of those information given to you. Like they've given us information such as below a graph of f of x equals to, so let's write that information down so that we can be able to deal with it. F of x is equals to x minus 4 squared minus 9. Remember, this is another question 4, because the question 4 really is where the functions start in paper 1 for each and every year, final examination, junior examination. So as long as there's paper 1 and paper 2, you will find these questions as such. So they said they've given us and a straight line. So they did not give us the straight line, they just told us that a straight line is G. So it's that straight line that you can see on the graph there, and our F is the parabola, which is positive. Okay, and the turning point and all those things are there. Okay, A and B are the x-intercepts of F. So you can make note of where A and B are and that they are x-intercept. And E is the turning point of F. C is the y-intercept of both F and G. The x-intercept of G is at D, whereby DE is parallel to the y-axis. So we now know that if this D is parallel to the y-axis, it's simple saying that it is perpendicular to the x-axis if the note is needed. It simply means that it's perpendicular to the x-axis. Okay, now let's go to the question. In 4.1, they said, write down the coordinate of E. We just have realized that, or we have been told that E is the turning point. And our equation has already highlighted, or it's in the turning point format. Remember, the turning point form will be the one whereby they say f of x is equals to x plus p squared plus q. So this is our turning point format equation. It is already in that. So we can be able just to extract what we are looking for in order for us to find E. So point E, therefore, it is the one that is represented by, in x, it's gonna be 4, because you'll say x is minus 4 equals 0, so then x equals 4. And then for y, it's gonna be minus 9. If you check on the graph, that fit perfectly because it is there in the positive side of x and negative side of y. And they gave you 2 marks. Very free and straightforward question. Calculate the coordinate of A. Remember, we have been told that A is the x-intercept of F. So question number 4.2, it says we must find the x-intercept of A. To find x-intercept in any graph, we must let our y to be equals to 0. So then it means we have 0, it's equals to x minus 4 squared minus 9. And if we add 9 in both sides, we'll have 9. It's equals to x minus 4 squared. Instead of wasting time and trying to remove the bracket, which most of you does, and waste the little time that we have, you can actually put a square root both sides. But remember, if you put a square root to 9, you must use plus or minus, and that is the rule. So it's plus or minus the square root of 9 is equals to the square root of x minus 4 squared in the bracket will result in x minus 4. And then the square root of 9, it is now 3. So what does this mean? It means that a positive 3 is equals to x minus 4, or a negative 3 will be equals to x minus 4. And then we do the simplification there to solve for x. Then we'll have x, it's equals to a 7. And also we'll have x is equals to 1. Okay, we'll have x is equals to 7 and x equals to 1. If we look at it, the one that is lesser, it should be the one that is next to 0, so that is 1. And the one that is bigger is 7. So meaning that the 7 belongs to B and the 1 belongs to A. Now the x coordinate, or the coordinates of A, will be determined by 1 and something else, which is what we have used at the beginning, where we have said y is equals to 0. So our coordinate therefore will be written in the form of 1 and 0. That is the coordinate of A. That's what the question wanted you to do, and you get the 3 marks. It is straightforward and it's simple to do it. Okay, now the question number 4.3, it says M is the reflection of C. Remember, C is the y-intercept. And if C is the y-intercept, it needs to have the 2 points whereby you will be able to find the solution. So how do we find that C coordinates? Remember, we were told that C is y-intercept of F. So to find the coordinate, we just have to multiply this twice. In other words, you're going to say a minus 4 times minus 4, which will give you a 16. And you subtract a 9 from it, for which you will left with a 7. So the coordinate of C is going to be 0 and 7. So let's write that down. The coordinate of C is 0 and 7. Now in this question, they say you must find M, the reflection of C, in the axis of symmetry. Remember guys, the axis of symmetry, it is the line drawn at the turning point. That is our axis of symmetry. And at the axis of symmetry, we need to know that from the axis of symmetry to the point that we're talking about and the other side, we must have the equal distance. So they said write the coordinate of M. Now our coordinate of M will be the reflection. Let's look at it. Our axis of symmetry, therefore, it has the x value as a 4. We found that at E. Now if x value is 4 and going back we are going to 0 at C, it means when we go forward we are going to add 4, because when we go back we subtract the 4 to go to 0. When we go forward we add to get to that other point. So 4 plus 4 will give us an 8 and the 7 remains, because that shift does not have anything to do with our x point. It's only dealing with our it doesn't have anything to do with our y point, because y will be the same All of them will be there at C. So if you look at C, this is where C is, and that's where M will be. So Y will be the same. Here, even there, our Y is still going to be a 7. But what we don't know here, it's going to be our X. So that is the X that we are shifting. From here, we go 4 units to the negative, and we go 4 units to the positive. And that's how we get to the X being 8. Okay. Question number 4.4. The question says, determine the equation of G in the form of Y is equals to mx plus C. Okay. That's not that challenging because already we know that C, it is the y-intercept of G, and we already have that point so far. And we can find now our equation. So let's see if we can be able to get to our gradient. Point D, we also know it. Our point D is going to be, let's write it down. Point D, which is the x-intercept of that graph, it's going to be 4 and 0. While point C, which is the y-intercept, it is 0 and 7. So the gradient, therefore, is going to be equal to the change of y, which is 7 minus 0, and the change of x, which is 0 minus 4. That will give us a negative 7 over 4. That is our gradient. And then from there, we will substitute either one of the point, either C or D, to get to our equation. So let's do that. Remember the equation that it seems simpler to use, or it can be this one. Not necessarily that is the only one, but it is much simpler to use than the other equation. Y minus y1 equals to m into x minus x1. It's quicker to use and simple because you substitute your y and your x and your gradient at the same time. So your y1, if we are using D, it's gonna be 0. So it's y minus 0 equals to, while your gradient is negative 7 over 4. We just have calculated it there. And your x, therefore, your x1 is going to be 4. And then you simplify. This, let's write it here. This will give us y, it equals to a negative 7 over 4x plus 7, because we will have a minus 7 over 4 times a negative 4. So the two 4s will give us a 1, and then we remain with a positive 7. Practically, that is going to be our equation of G. So let's write it in that format. G of x is equals to negative 7 over 4 x plus 7. However, the question wanted you to end there, so that's what you should have done and end up there. Okay, now that is 3 marks. You just need to find the gradient and then you find the solution. And sometimes they can ask you to write in the form of g of x. Then you do that. The last question, it is 4.5. 4.5 requires us to find the inverse g of negative 1, and we must write it in the form of y is equals to something. So we will do that and get to the solution. The last question in 4.5 says, write down the equation of g of minus 1 in the form of y is equals to that. Okay, so let's do that. Remember, this is 4.5, we are still in question 4. This question need you to just do the inverse of equation that you just found. So if you got your equation now, it was y equals a negative 7 over 4 x plus 7. So it's a negative 7 divided by 4x plus 7. That is the equation that we have found in 4.4. Okay, now from there you must do what it needed to be done for you to get the inverse. Remember, for the inverse, we interchange the values of y and the values of x. In other words, whenever you see y, you put x, and where you see x, you put y. That's how we do the inverse. So let's do that. It means we're going to rewrite this as x is equals to -7 divided by 4y plus 7. And that means we have x minus 7 equals to -7 over 4y. We must make y the subject of the formula. So that means we are going to go on divide every term, including x and -7, by -7 over 4. So if we divide, there we'll have x divided by -7 over 4 minus 7 divided by -7 over 4 equals to a -7 over 4y divided by a -7 over 4, for which this -7 over 4 will divide with this -7 over 4. Then you remain with y. Now here, one can say, how do I get, remember there's 1 here, so it's like 1 divided by -7 over 4. You can simply use your calculator to get to the solution or any other means. So using your fraction button, it is 1 divided by, and press another fraction button of a -7 divided by 4. It will now give you the answer as -4 over 7. So this is a -4 over 7x. Okay, folks? The next part, you have a -7. So you're going to go to the fraction and you put 7 divided by, you put another fraction, and -7 divided by 4. And you get a -4. And the -4 times 4 will now give us a +4. Now this means that our equation, as they said, it must be in the form of y equals something. So we'll say y is equals to a -4 over 7x plus 4. And this is now the equation of g of -1. So this is, to do that equation, remember, you must interchange. So that is it. It's the equation of g of -1, which is the inverse. Okay, that is the end of question 4. Thank you. Again, matrix, we are still on the revision of functions, which is in paper 1 of your question paper. So that is a sample of another question from a question paper again. So this information is given to us. The sketch below shows the graphs of f of x is equals to the logarithm with base 5 of x. So this is the graph of a logarithm. If we look at it, is this line that is going this one, that is f of x. And we are given another one, which is g of x equals 2 divided by x minus 1 plus 1. That is our hyperbolic function. And we are told that t and u are the x-intercepts. So that is t and u are the x-intercept of the graphs g and f respectively. So t is the x-intercept of g and u is the x-intercept of f. That's what respectively means. This line, so there is a line there, you can see it, a straight line y is equals to x passing through the origin, intersect the asymptotes at r, if you look at that, and the graph of g at v. So that is where the v is. Okay, let's check. This is question 4 still. So we are dealing with the question 4. And the question 4.1 says, write down the coordinates of u. Remember, folks, u, it is the asymptote that passes through the x-axis. So if you look at the information given, the graph or the equation which you have, that is g of x equals to 2 divided by x minus 1 plus 1. So if you want to find the asymptote that is passing through u, or that is on that line of u, you are going to use the x part or the denominator, which now it's going to give you x equals 1. So therefore, the coordinates of u, it's going to be 1 and 0. 0 is just because it's on the x-axis. Remember, the line x-axis is the line whereby y is always equals 0. Okay, that's 1 mark. It's pretty clear and straightforward. When we go to 4.2, they say write down the equations of the asymptotes of G. So they are repeating something here if you look at it. Remember, for you to realize you were looking at the asymptote of G. Now they are saying to you, write down the equation. In an equation form, therefore, your asymptotes will be y equals 1, and the other one is x equals 1. Look at this. The y equals 1 is your horizontal asymptote, and the x equals 1 is your vertical asymptote. And you have collected now another 2 marks, so it is straightforward and pretty clear to get. The 4.3, it says determine the coordinate of t. Remember, they told us that t, it is the x-intercept of G at the beginning. So then it means that we are going to let y to be 0. So if you let your y to be 0, which is your g of x, you will have 0 equals 2 divided by x minus 1 plus 1, which will be a minus 1 equals 2 divided by x minus 1. Remember, the minus 1 happen when you subtract 1 in both sides of your equation. So if you say 0 minus 1, you'll get a minus 1. If you say a 1 minus 1, you'll get a 0. That's why on the right side you have 2 divided by x minus 1. Then you go on, multiply both sides by x minus 1. So here what you have done is to subtract 1, subtract 1. Then you get to the statement, multiply by the x minus 1, multiply by the x minus 1. When you do that, you will end up on the right side with only 2, and on the left side you will multiply out to remove the brackets. So then you will have a negative x and plus 1. Now your negative x will be equals to 2 minus 1, because you are going to say minus 1 in both sides of your equation. So that is the second statement. After that, you will have a negative x equals 1. Then you multiply or you divide both sides by a negative 1. Then you remain with x equals a minus 1. And that is your x-intercept at t. But they say you must write it in the coordinate form, because they say determine the coordinates. So you must write it in the coordinate form with minus 1 and 0. Remember, you said y is 0 at the beginning for you to end up with minus 1. So that's what you needed to have done, folks, and you get it right. It's simple, straightforward, and clear. And you get your 2 marks. Okay. Then we go to question 4.4. If you look at 4.4, they're saying write down the equation of h. Now, if you look here, you don't have the h, but they're saying the equation is of h. The reflection of f in the line y is equals to x. Remember, the equation of f is log base 5x, or log x with base 5. So you must find its reflection along the y is equals to x line. And remember, y is equals to x line is the line that makes an inverse to the graph. So what they're asking you here is to find the inverse of the graph of f, for which they did not really specify. They wanted you to remember or to be able to acknowledge that a reflection along line y equals x is the same as the inverse. So to do that, then we're just going to be writing our equations. So you interchange them. In other words, there you have f of x is equals to log with base 5 of x. Remember, your f of x is your y. So this can be rewritten as y is equals to log of x divided by log of 5. And then you interchange your x and y positions. When you interchange your x and y positions, You will therefore have y log 5 equals log x. And then y log 5 can be rewritten as log 5 to the exponent y. That is the same with, which will be equals to log of x. And now if you look at it, you have log y to the exponent of 5 in both sides, so you can change it. Then you have 5 to the y equals to x. And in this way, you need to write it as y is equal to something. So your answer therefore will be y is equals to 5 to the exponent x. Remember folks, if you have written y is equals to 5 to the exponent x, you will not be penalized. You will have your full 2 marks because that's what they're asking you to do. So in other words, if you can be able to have another way of figuring out how to write this, you can, and write it as y is equals to 5 to the exponent x, and then that will give you your 2 marks. Okay, and that's it. Okay, we are continuing with the question 4. So we are going to question 4.5. Remember, this is the question that we are talking about. So in question 4.5, they said, write down the equation of the asymptote of h. In other words, if they say the asymptote of h, they are taking that h and they say it's h of with x minus 3. Now the x minus 3 equation of asymptote with the h, it's just, we are in 4.5, so let's write that down. It's 4.5. The asymptote therefore will be y equals 0. It is y equals 0 because we are dealing with x minus 3 and it does not really have another asymptote than the one that is. Remember, we had written the equation of h in 4.4, which was the reflection of f in line y equals, so it was y, let's remind ourselves, it was y equals 5 to the power x. So there's no shift that has happened there. In other words, if we had to write, we'll say plus 0. But plus 0 is the same as when we have written nothing. That is why our asymptote, therefore, will be y equals 0. I guess that is clear and it is straightforward. In 4.6, they said we must calculate the coordinates of v. So 4.6, we are looking for the coordinates of v. If we look at it, the coordinates of v, it is at the intersection of the straight line y is equals to x and the hyperbola g of x. So the intersection means the two are equal. In other words, your y there will be equals to g of x. Remember, y is x equals to, the g of x is 2 divided by x minus 1 plus 1. And then we do the algebra to get to the solution. Remember, moving the 1, we subtract it in both sides. So we'll have x minus 1. And here we'll remain with the 2 divided by x minus 1. And then we multiply both sides by x minus 1. So when you multiply both sides by x minus 1, we will now remain with x minus 1 times x minus 1 in a bracket equals 2. Remove the bracket, we'll have x squared minus x plus 1. And there's a minus 2. Okay, and from there, we do the simplification. When we simplify, we look at the like terms. So we have x squared minus 2x minus 1 equals 0. And then we factorize. When we factorize there, we'll have x, let me see. When we factorize there, we'll have x squared minus 2x minus 1. We will now have to use a formula, which is a quadratic formula. It is x equals to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all divide by 2a. So folks, every time when you can't factorize, you will have to use a formula which is a quadratic formula, and in this case that is a formula. Remember that your value of b, it is the one that is attached to x, and the number that is a coefficient of x squared is the value of a, and the one that has nothing to do with x, it is alone, it's gonna be your constant, and that is c. So we're gonna have a minus which represents this one, and minus 2 plus or minus the square root of, we said b is minus 2, so it's going to be minus 2 squared minus 4, a is 1, and then c is minus 1. Okay, then we divide it by 2 times a 1, which is a. And then you can simplify this in the calculator, then they will give you a solution whereby it is 2 of them. It is giving you x being equals to 1 plus the square root of 2, or x will be equals to 1 minus the square root of 2. You can write in the decimal format or leave it like that. It will never have a problem. Now remember, we are looking for the coordinates of v, and one of the graph along that line or along that point v, it is y is equals to x line. That simply means that even our y value will be the same as our x value. So we're gonna say also y is the same as them. So in other words, you're going to go further and say, and y is equals to 1 plus the square root of 2, or it is y equals to 1 minus the square root of 2. So you go back to your graph and you say, okay, where do I find a positive and where do I find a negative intersection? In first quadrant, I'm going to find both positive intersection, and in fourth quadrant, I'm going to find negative intersections. So it means that my coordinates of v, it is actually the positive one. So it's 1 plus the square root of 2 for x, and also the y is 1 plus the square root of 2. You can actually write this thing as decimal. There is no harm on that, and that is the solution to that question. Okay, I guess that is much clear and everyone can get it right. Okay, the last question is 4.7. So 4.7 is kind of another little bit of a trick, but with no much of the problem. Let's look at it. Determine the coordinates of t prime, the point which is symmetrical to t, about the point R. So in other words, they're saying if you look at point T, there's point T, there's point R here is going to be at the middle. There's another point here that is symmetrical, for which when we fold this, they will all be on top of each other. Whatever point is there plus the point T. So that is the point we are looking for. Now, what did we say T was? We said point T was -1 and 0 in this point. And point R is our intersection of the asymptote, which is a 1 and a 1. So that's what we are looking at. We are at 1 and 1. Going to -1, how do we move from there to go there? That's how we actually direct. We count it until we reach our point T prime being a 3 and a 2, with just the movement from the given graph, from R to T and from R to whatever point. So the point that we are moving to the graph and to R must be the same that you're going to move to the point and then go back to the R, from R. Okay, thank you. Grade 12, we are still on the revision of the functions, paper 1. Guys, if you look at these questions, they're actually interlinking, but you need to remember the content and the basic of it. And you will be able to follow the logic and you get it right. Some questions can repeat itself, but with a different context. So you need to remember where you have found it and how is it directed to the knowledge you have been taught. This question is now question number 5. So if you look at it, we are running through, or we are playing around question 5, question 4, question 5, question 4. And these are the basic questions that one can collect marks and make sure that you pass on these questions. Okay, the information given in this, they said, the graph of g of x is equals to ax is drawn in the sketch below. The point S 2 and 9 lies on G. T is the y-intercept of G. So let's look at that graph they are talking about. This is the graph. You can see that as x is increasing, y is also increased. And this graph, we are given 1 point on it, so we can go and check the questions. All the time you are given a graph or an equation, you must try to relate it to what you have or what you know on the graph. 5.1. Write down the coordinates of T. Folks, we have been told that T is the y-intercept. So to find the coordinates of T, it means we have to let our x to be equal to 0. Even though our equation is not complete, we are given g of x is equals to a to the power x. So even that is the case, we still can, or we still need to find our value of y for intersections. Now, look at this. We said every time we're looking for y-intercept, we must let x to be equal to 0. Now, when you are letting x to be 0, then it means that we are going to put 0 wherever we see x. In other words, your g of 0 then will be equal to a to the power 0. But in terms of exponent, we say everything to the power 0, it is going to be equals to 1. So even a to the power 0 is equals to 1. Therefore, the coordinates of t, it is going to be the 0 that you have used or you have let to be, and also the 1 that you have calculated just now. You see how simple you can get that 2 marks. That is simple and straightforward. Okay, let's go to the second question, which is 5.2. In 5.2, they say calculate the value of a. Now we are looking at the value of a, which is what we were thinking of. It doesn't give us full information. Okay, to find the value of a, remember we have g of x, it's equals to a to the power x, for which g of x represent y. People, this is just y. So now, the coordinate that we are given is s, which consists of both x and y. X there is 2 and y is 9. So we're going to substitute using that s there. Our y is going to become 9, which will be equals to a to the power 2. Now we need to write 9 so that it will have the power of 2 in terms of exponent. So this can be this written as the same as 3 to the power 2 equals to a to the exponent 2. Now, if the exponents are the same, we actually ignore them and we focus on the bases. So now a is equals to a 3. And we are done with that question. So you see how simple this can be, or can be, but they can try to trick you by starting off asking something, and then after that they ask you a. So you think it's not possible for you to do that, which is possible. Okay, folks, let's go to 5.3. Question 5.3, it says the graph H is obtained by reflecting G in the y-axis. So this is the y-axis. If we reflect this graph G along this line, we are going to find H. Write down the equation. We're just going to straighten write the equation. If I try to redraw what they're saying here and try to interpret, as x increases, y is decreasing. So it means there's nothing changing here except the fact that my a now will be less than a 1. It's going to be a decreasing graph. So I'm going to write my h of x as being equals to 3 to the power negative x, which can be rewritten as 1 over 3 to the exponent of x. And that's what they wanted you to do. Did they give us a condition of how to write it? No. So if they did not give us the condition, we can write by using h of x, or we can use y is equals to. Both ways it will be correct. And that is the end of functions. I guess you guys will enjoy this and you will have a very good examination due to functions. Thank you.